I welcome you all to the module 8 of the course. So, the module 8 is about the concept of personality, and this is the first lecture of this module, and overall this is lecture number 19. So, today's lecture is titled as personality, nature and assessment. So, we will be talking about the nature of personality, the definition of personality, and a little bit about how personality is assessed in the field of psychology. So, before we talk about today's lecture, let me give you a brief recap of the last lecture. And the last lecture was lecture number 18, which was part of the earlier module on emotion. So, in the last lecture, we discussed some of the historical background of the concept of emotion and theories of emotion. In that context, we discussed the contribution of Charles Darwin, William James. We also discussed Cannon-Bard theory, Schechter-Singer theory. And we also discussed some of the appraisal theories of emotion, and at the end we discussed Jezong-Ledoch's theory of emotion, and we also discussed one particular or specific application of emotion in the context of positive emotion. How can we enhance positive emotion, and what are the benefits of positive emotion? So, these are some of the things that we discussed in the last lecture. In today's lecture, we will talk about the concept of personality, what is the meaning of personality, and the different domains of knowledge about human personality. What are the different types of theories, what are the different concepts under all of these theories, and at the end we will talk about a little bit of how personality is assessed or measured. So, let us start today's lecture. So, when we use the word personality, if you see the word personality, it comes from the Latin word persona. So, the word personality is derived from the Latin word persona, which basically means the mask. So this is typically the word, the masks were used by theater artists mostly. From that concept the word persona came. So, a particular character when people want to display in theaters and movies, they used to carry those certain type of masks, that will specifically to address certain kind of characters. So, the mask is basically, so persona or the personality is basically derived from that word. It is the kind of mask or kind of particular specific characteristics of, the characteristics that we display, So, that is where typically the word personality is derived from that word persona, which means mask. It is the kind of mask that we wear or display to the society and so on. So, that is the main root word from which the word personality comes. Now, when we use the term personality in the layman context, obviously there are so many connotations that people have. People have multiple ideas around this word. People use personality in the context of personhood, individuality, personal charm and so on. So, these are all layman ideas. People have all this connotation when they use the word personality. When somebody says this person has a great personality, so basically what they are saying that this person has a lot of charm and certain kind of impact and so on. People also use personality just to say he has a different individuality and so on. So, these are all different connotations of the word personality, but when we use the word specifically in the context of the field of psychology, obviously we mean a very specific thing that we will talk about here. So, it was the American psychologist Alport who popularized this term in 1937 after his publication of Personality, a Psychological Interpretation. That is the name of the book, and in that book he discussed the concept of personality very formally in the discipline of psychology, and this term became more popular. Before this book came up, a lot of other terms that was used in the field of psychology such as character, temperament were very commonly used in the field of psychology. The word personality became more focused in the field of psychology and became more popular by the use of Gordon Alport use of this term in his book. Now, one of the classic psychological definition Gordon Alport gave in his book, which is still cited, and it captures most of the essential aspects of personality. So, that definition is like this here: personality is the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine his unique adjustment to his or her environment. So, it is talking about certain things which we need to understand here. So, it is defining personality as a dynamic organization within the individual. So, there is a certain organization within the individual, and that is not a very rigid organization. So, there is some kind of dynamism, but still there is a structure in it. And what is included in that structure? All the psychophysical system that determine his unique adjustment to his environment. It includes psychological system, physiological system that determines his unique way of reacting to the environment. So, this is one of the very one of the cited definition which is still popular. So, this definition basically says one thing is dynamic organization, which means personality is structured but flexible in a sense. It is not very rigid. Still we cannot say the personality cannot be changed completely. So, there is a structure in it, but there is a flexibility also involved in it. Talks about all the psychophysical system, means both psychological, mind and biological components are involved in the makeup of the personality, and it determines what unique adjustments. Each person adapts differently to the situations. So, if you put different people in the same situation, they will adapt differently to the same situation based on their reaction patterns and so on. Now, so that is one of the definition that is still cited, but in a general sense, when we talk about personality in psychology, in a more general sense, it is defined as the relatively enduring patterns of thoughts, feelings, motivations and behaviors that distinguish one individual from another, and it remains fairly consistent across the time and situations. So, what does that mean is that when we use the word personality in the field of psychology, we are talking about relatively enduring patterns. What does that mean is that every individual has certain patterns which are relatively permanent, relatively enduring. So, that means they do not change on a daily basis. People have different characteristics that are relatively stable characteristics, which defines the person. So, those characteristics are typically called as called or termed under or considered under the concept of personality. So, those enduring patterns, those patterns may be reflected in the thoughts, in the feelings, in the motivations, in the behaviors. So, every individual has certain patterns of reactions which get expressed in the thoughts, behaviors, emotions, and this determines the individuality of the person, because every individual will have different patterns of reaction in terms of thoughts, feelings and behaviors, and this distinguishes one person from another person. So, that distinguishes one individual from another, and it remains fairly consistent across the situation and time. So, that means, so basically means is that people have different ways of reacting to the situation or thought processes or feelings. If I say someone is extrovert, that means I am talking in terms of certain behavior of the person. That person is outgoing and very social and likes to meet people, lot of energy and outgoing and so on. So, I can say I can only include that characteristics under personality when there is a consistency in it. So, if that person is extrovert most of the time, like it is not like he is extrovert today and becomes introvert next day, then it is not permanent. This is then it is a very transitory situational thing. If most of the time, if a person shows a particular character, let us say extrovertness, then I can say this is most probably the part of personality characteristics, because this is consistently shown by that person across the time and situation. So, if you look at this definition, so personality in a very simpler term we can say is a consistent way a person thinks, feels and behaves that makes them different from others. So, those consistent patterns of behavior, thoughts, processes, emotions that makes one individual different from another individual. So, personality defines the uniqueness of the individual. And another important thing is, in this definition, what is one of the important components is that characteristics should be relatively enduring, means relatively permanent, relatively consistent. It should not change on a daily basis or weekly basis, then it is situational, we cannot say it is a part of personality. So, personality is stable over time, it does not change dramatically from day to day. However, it is not completely fixed also, as we discussed in the earlier examples. It is like there is a structure in it, but it can be changed, but it does not change very often. So, development and life experiences can sometimes change the personality also gradually, but it is not like on a daily basis or weekly basis people change their personality. Okay. So, one thing is that it has to be relatively enduring patterns. Then the relatively enduring what? One aspect is thoughts. What is included here? How a person typically thinks. For example, somebody may be in general optimistic, some people are pessimistic thinking. That can be part of personality. If person is most of the time very optimistically, thinks optimistically, some people most of the time think very pessimistically. So it is not like today or tomorrow, most of the time this is how people think, then it is a part of personality. Some people are suspicious most of the time, some people are trusting mindset and so on. These are expression of personality through the thought processes. So this can be considered under personality characteristics. So how personality expresses in the thought process, these are the examples. Then how it expresses in the feelings, so it is about emotional tendencies here. For example, somebody generally remains calm, some people are very anxious most of the time. So this is how personality is expressed through emotions. Some people are cheerful, some people are irritable. So these are emotional expression of personality characteristics. Then personality can also express itself in terms of behavior or actions. Behavior means observable actions. Okay. So typical way people acts in the different situation. For example, some people are outgoing, some people are reserved most of the time. So that is what we discussed about in terms of extrovert, introvert people. Some people are organized, some people are very chaotic or careless kind of people. So that is an expression of personality in the behavior or actions of that person. Then personality talks about individual differences. All these characteristics that we discuss in terms of thoughts, emotions and behaviors, this distinguishes people from one another and makes a person unique, because those patterns could be very uniquely configured in different individuals in terms of thought processes, emotions and actions. So there is a unique combination and configuration of all this in different individuals that makes a person very unique person. Okay. So it explains why people react differently to the same situation, because everybody are unique in terms of their thought processes, emotions and behaviors, how it expresses. So this personality can explain uniqueness of the individual, individual differences in terms of their reaction patterns in the different situations. And all these characteristics has to be consistent across situations. So we are talking about the different aspect of the definition that we discussed, that we talked about. So these are like breaking down the definition. So personality is about individual differences. It expresses in the thoughts, emotions and actions. It has to be relatively enduring or permanent. Then it has to be consistent across the situations. For example, a shy person tends to be shy in most of the situations, maybe in the class, at work, in social gatherings. So that means that then we can say that shyness is the part of that personality, because the person is shy in most of the situations. So across time, that means enduring, it has to be relatively permanent across time. So that we discussed, like it should not be like today person is extrovert and tomorrow he becomes introvert. That means that is situational thing, it is not the part of personality. So across time it has to be enduring, across situation it has to be enduring. So if somebody is a shy person, that means he or she shows shyness in different situations like classroom, workplace, social gathering and so on. So this cross situational consistency defines personality. Cross situational, across time and situation consistency is something very important in the definition of personality. There are two related concepts which are also generally people kind of synonymously used in the context of personality. Many times people use them almost synonymously with the personality, but they are technically different. One is called temperament, another is called as character. Now these terms are generally used interchangeably in the lot of layman context also, but within psychology they have some distinct meanings. How they are different from personality and from each other. Let us see. So temperament is usually, this refers to those aspects of psychological individuality that are present at birth or at least early in child development, and is related to emotional expression and presumed to have biological basis. So, temperament are those characteristics which are generally present from birth or early in the childhood, and these are mostly expressed in terms of emotional reactions, and they have mostly biological basis. So, these are more biological than psychological expressions. So, temperament characteristics are believed to be rooted in bodily physiological processes. So, certain physiological processes leads to these differences in your patterns of emotional reactions, So, this reflects how a person naturally reacts and based on the biological basis, based on biological basis. So, on biological basis. Okay. So, this is how it is specifically defined here. Let us give some examples of temperament. If you see some babies, they have easy temperament, means calm temperament. Some babies are very calm, sleeps regularly, adapt easily to new environment. Now, there is no influence of environment because the child has just taken birth, and there is not much, the child has not learned anything from the environment. But there is a differences in the children in their behavior, if you see. All the babies, they are different in their temperament or characteristics. Some babies could be very calm sleeping. Some babies may have very difficult temperament, where they cries often, very irritable, reacts intensely to small changes in their environment. Now, how can we explain those differences? So, these differences must be in the biological basis of that person. The different whatever, the body chemistry, the genetic influence and so on. So, they are based on, because the baby has not learned anything from the environment. So, there is no influence of the environment as such. By birth, the baby is very different, reaction patterns, emotional reaction patterns are different. So, it can also express typically in the emotional reactivity, someone who gets angry or excited very quickly even in the minor situations. So, these are all examples of temperament, emotional reactivity which are typically based on biological basis. So, these are largely inborn tendencies and seen early in life. So, those are called as typical temperament as the term is used. So, they are also part of personality, but the temperament word is used typically for this kind of inborn biologically based emotional reaction patterns. So, obviously they are determine certain reaction pattern, but that does not mean this is a kind of fixed or permanent thing. Those lot of things can change later also. So, character, the other term that is also used, many people use it in the context of personality, but that is also different. So, character on the other hand usually refers to those personal characteristics that are relevant to moral conduct, self-mastery, willpower, integrity and so on. This is not biologically based. Character is something that we learn from the society, and typically they may include things like morally good or bad conduct that people does. So, someone with poor character, basically when we say, that means someone who has certain problem with the moral behavior, maybe someone deceitful, impulsive, shiftless and so on. Someone may lack honesty and so on. So, those are like typically comes under character, but obviously they can also be part of larger personality traits and so on. But typically characters include a lot of these moral conduct related behaviors. Character is often assumed to be a result of socialization. It depends on learning socially. How do you form socially appropriate behaviors like self-control, helping behavior, prosocial behavior, so on. So, this is typically what we learn and it emerges later in our life. On the other hand, temperament is more of biologically based initial emotional reaction pattern, those are called temperament. Character is generally we learn them later from the society, from the parents, schools and so on. So, those becomes part of character. So, this reflects what person chooses and values. So, this is based on how a person chooses to behave and what kind of value system they have. So, this is the character is typically part of socialization process, and the person learns to or chooses certain behaviors or certain values and so on. So, some of the examples of character like honesty, a student who refuses to cheat in exam even when others are cheating. So, that is an example of honesty as a character. then responsibility, person who completes task on time, kindness, compassion, perseverance, moral courage, all these are examples of characters. So, although both temperament and characters have distinct connotations, psychologists tend to think they are also different aspects of personality characteristics. They can also be subsumed under the broader concept of personality. So, psychology's concept of personality may contain temperament as well as characters within it in a broad, so personality is a broad spectrum. Under that we can have things like temperament and character associated, or personality subsumed both of these aspects. Now, if you look at psychology texts or any personality theory books, you will find varieties of personality theories are discussed. What are these theories? What are this personality theory? A personality theory is an attempt to describe and explain how people are similar, how they are different, and why every individual is unique. So, personality theory is a broad explanations, or maybe providing certain descriptions or explanations of why people are different, what explains personality, what explains individual differences. So, these theories are attempt to describe and explain the personality or the reasons behind differences, individual differences, why people are unique, why people are different, what are the mechanisms involved in it, how to describe or how to characterize all these differences. So, personality theory tries to understand human differences and uniqueness, and basically they try to explain human personality. So, there are different theories that try to explain human personality from diverse perspectives. So, personality theory ambitiously tries to explain the whole person. So, in an ideal situations, every personality theories attempts to explain the whole person, which is a very ambitious attempt, that it tries to explain human behavior almost in a holistic sense, in all the aspects, that why human beings behave the way they behave, why one is different from another. So, you are trying to explain all the aspects of human behavior, So, that is what personality theories tries to understand, explain the whole person. However, it is important to understand that no single theory can adequately explain all the aspects of the human personality. So, obviously, all theories tries to explain human personality, but no theory can actually explain all the dimensions of human behavior and all the aspects of human personality, because human beings are very complex. But ideally, every personality theory aims to do that, but they cannot do it because of the complexity of human beings involved in it. So, every personality theory has its own unique strengths and limitations. So, every theory focuses on certain aspects, that is their strength, and they neglect other dimensions, so that leads to their limitations of those theories. So, understanding about whole integrated person, that is one of the mission of personality psychology. One reason for studying personality psychology is then to address psychology's most complex and interesting topic, the whole integrated, coherent, unique individual. Unlike other branches of psychology that in any way in the beginning they focus on only specific things, like social psychology will look at social behavior only. Clinical psychology will look at psychological disorder and the various aspects around it. But personality psychology in the beginning, it aims to understand every aspect of human personality. So, that is the main mission of personality psychology. It seeks to understand the complete person in the context of psychological life, and which encompasses cognitions, emotions, behaviors, interaction with the society, culture, and so on. So, all this approach aims to explore the interconnectedness of different psychological elements within the individual and gain holistic understanding. So, that is the aim of most of these personality theories. Now, this mission, as we said, is not really in a practical sense not possible, because the only problem with this mission is the studying whole person. It is almost impossible, because it is not possible to explain in one theory every aspect of human behavior. So, this interesting mission is the source of personality psychology's biggest difficulty also. So, even though the personality psychologist aims to study the whole person, in reality they choose to limit the focus on specific thing instead of trying to consider everything, because no theory could explain everything. So, their focus is always on, they have to focus only on certain aspects to explain it properly, otherwise they cannot explain anything properly. So, this focus is limited aspects led to emergence of, since this theory is focused on certain limited aspects of personality, that lead to diverse theories, because every theory is focusing on something. That led to emergence of diverse personality theories. Based on the different domains of knowledge, different theories evolved, different types of personality theories evolved. So, it is like whole personality is like a whole elephant, and some of the various parts and the interconnections among them is what the total personality. For personality, each part is a domain, but if you see all the theories, it is like one theory is explaining about leg of the elephant, one another theory is talking about whatever the different aspects, taking one part at a time. So, that leads to development of different theories. So, various views of researcher in personality stem not from the fact that one perspective is right and others wrong, but it is about that they are focusing on different domains of knowledge. So, it is not about one theory is right over the other, it is about the theories, one theory is focusing on one aspect, another is focusing on different aspects. So, they are kind of complementary to each other. So, if you see there are different diverse and theories of personality we can find out in the field of psychology, and this is one particular branch of psychology which has very rich theoretical background. So, if you see that based on the different focus on different aspects of personality, different theories emerge. For example, some theories are called trait theories, and what are those trait theories, what are their focus? Trait theories focuses on identifying and categorizing consistent patterns of behavior and personality trait. So, the trait theories are trying to understand what are the different ways we can characterize human beings, how can we classify human being based on different characteristics and traits. So, that is more of an the descriptive kind of theory, identifying, categorizing consistent patterns of behavior. For example, we talked about some people can be categorized as introvert, some people categorized as extrovert. These are all part of trait theories. We will talk about trait theory in the next lecture in detail. Then there is another theory called psychoanalytical theory. So, these theories emphasize unconscious motives and conflict influenced by childhood experiences and early relationships. So, psychoanalytical theory basically is also one of the most popular theories in personality that focuses on human unconscious motives. That there is an unconscious mind, we all have unconscious layers in our mind. Mind is not fully conscious. So, there are different layers of minds, and a large chunk of human mind is unconscious, and that is all the time influencing us, our behaviors, our emotions and so on. So, psychoanalytical theory looks at that unconscious mind and how childhood experiences plays very important role in that. We will also describe psychoanalytical theory in this module. Then there are other theories which are called as behavioral theories, which views personality as a result of learned behavior and responses to the environmental stimuli. So, behavioral theory, which we discussed in the learning also little bit, but they conceptualize personality is primarily based on environmental influences. Whatever person you become, it is because of the environmental influences. So, their focus is majorly on the environment. Then there are cognitive theories of personality that focuses on how thoughts, beliefs, perception influence personality development and behavior. Their focus is on how thought processes gives us unique identity and so on, different patterns of thoughts that we have. So, those are called as our belief system, how they influence in the makeup of what kind of person we are. So, that is called cognitive psychology. Cognitive theories. Then there are social cognitive. So, these are cognitive theories, then there are social elements involved in it. It talks about interaction between personal, behavioral and environmental influences. So, it looks into interactions of not just cognitive factors, but other environmental factors, behavioral factors, together, and it becomes, and how it, creates human personality and all these factors. Then there are humanistic theories that emphasize personal growth, self-actualization and importance of subjective experiences and the free will. Humanistic theories are very different in their approach in terms of they try to understand what kind of potential human being have, how can they actualize those potential, how can people grow, and all the positive qualities that are important in contributing or increasing the quality of our life. Then there are socio-cultural theories that focuses on how cultural societal factors shape personality development, norms and behavior. So that is self-explanatory. So they focus on social and cultural factors and how they shape the different kind of person we have, like the role of social norms, cultural belief system and so on. So like this, there are different approaches or theories of personality that talks about, focuses on different dimensions or domains of behavior that led to different types of personality theories. So all these personality theories, within each domains often use different theoretical perspective, focus on different facts. As a consequence, psychologists from different domains can sometimes appear contradict each other because they are focusing on different aspects. Many theories sometimes look like contradictory to each other. For example, psychoanalytical theory will say personalities consist of irrational sexual aggressive instinct because they focus on unconscious mental processes which influences emotions, aggressions and so on, and which ultimately motives all human activity. Cognitive perspective on the other hand will generally consider humans are more rational scientists who try to interpret things, anticipate, predict, control events that occur within their world. Both this perspective explaining behavior, but they look very contradictory to each other, almost opposite to each other. But in reality that is what explains the complexity of human beings. Both are true in the different context. So on the surface this perspective may appear incompatible and opposite to each other. How can human be both irrational and rational? But that's the truth. Humans are both rational and irrational. How can human be driven by desire to yet be cool and detached from their quest for accurate prediction? On deeper examination, the contradiction may be more apparent than actuality. So it is entirely possible, for example, that humans have both powerful sexual and aggressive motivations, which motivates a lot of their behavior, and they also a lot of time our cognitive mechanisms are more dominant where the perceives predict event more accurately and rationally and so on. So both theories focus on different aspects, but both aspects may be true depending on the context of behaviors. So it is entirely possible that sometimes basic emotions, motivations are activated and other times the cool cognitive mechanisms are activated. So only thing is that in that context probably the psychoanalytic theory can explain something better, and in this context cognitive theories could explain better. So therefore they are kind of complementary to each other. And it is also possible that two sets of mechanisms sometimes become linked to one another, such as when rational mechanisms are used in the service of fulfilling desires and so on. So some the same situation, same behavior, both can be also linked sometimes. Your rational element can be linked to fulfilling your irrational desires and so on. So that is also possible. That shows the whole complexity of human behavior. So although each of these theoretical perspective may focus on a very critically important different aspects of human psychological function, each perspective by itself does not capture the whole person. So the mission of understanding whole person is obviously no theories could explain everything of the human behavior, but they are partly explain the different aspects of human behavior. So is there any grand theory possible in the personality? That is, at this moment it is not there, and probably this may not be there any time. There are great theories, but but they are all partial in their approaches. So a theory that accounts for everything probably will not be able to explain anything well. So if we even have a grand theory that tries to integrates everything, we may have a such theory, but the problem will be that theory will not be able to explain anything better, because that will be focusing on too many things without explaining anything more specifically. So a theory that tries to explain almost everything, the grand theory, would probably not provide the best explanation for any one thing. For example, if you look at present context, behaviorism focuses only on changing behavior and very effective in changing behavior because it ignores everything else and focuses on how can we change behavior based on environmental stimuli. Whereas phenomenological humanistic approach is able to offer coherent account of free will, growth and so on, because it overlooks many other behavior that looks like very conditioned. But they are not focusing at all on that. They are only trying to understand free will, growth and so on. So, because they are focusing on partially only specific things, they are able to explain it very well. If the same theory looks into everything, it will not be able to explain anything, because other parts will contradict with each other. So, that is about briefly about the concept of personality and why so many different theories of personality. Now, let us briefly talk about how psychologists measures personality, So, researchers use different methods to understand and predict personality, Assessment of personality and measuring personality is used in mental health settings, schools, workplaces, military setups and so on, because in many practical life context, there is a necessity to understand what type of person they are. In different kinds of job, people may need different types of individuals. So, they may do personality assessment to understand what kind of person that person is, whether that person will be suitable for this job or not. How can we understand? One of the ways to understand is that use assessment of personality. So, most of this method measures behaviors, infer personality trait from those behaviors and so on, and there are standardized tools to measure that. Typically, there are 4 methods of personality assessment. If you see all the various methods, one is inventories, which are paper and pencil type of questionnaire, where there will be some standardized questionnaires and you have to tick on the right option. So, there will be question, there may be yes no type of question, there may be whether you agree or disagree, or you agree strongly or strongly disagree. Based on those options, people answer those structured question and there can be a score coming out of it. So, this is the most popular measurement, personality assessment technique. This is the most popular that inventories are used to measure, because this is very standardized. People can get a score and we can understand. Obviously, there are limitations to it also. So, there are projective tests also. These are not very popular and not very commonly used, where there are some ambiguous stimulus will be there. We will talk little bit about that. There will be certain cards will be given to you and there will be some very ambiguous, not very clear what is there in that picture. And the psychologist will tell you to describe this picture. The idea is that once you describe this picture, because things are not very clear, you can project anything on there. So, your unconscious, whatever you want to, what kind of person you are, everything will be reflected on how you describe that picture or what kind of stories you tell. So, this is based on psychoanalytical principles. Then people also use observations to record what kind of person you are, based on record and analyze their behavior in the real life setup. Observe based on observational data. We can also make some sense what kind of person one is. Some people also use some kind of structured interviews, where certain verbal question answers are used to get further understanding of the personality. So, typically these 4 methods are used: inventories, projective test, observations and interviews. Most popular is obviously the use of inventories. So, inventories, this is most common, as we said. So, this is inventories largely, it may include, typically it includes lengthy questionnaires. Some questionnaires are not so lengthy, depending on what kind of test one is using. Respondent may mark true, false certain items and they have to mark whether it is true for them or false for them. Indicate agreement on a rating scale, 3 or more choices, and based on that certain scores are then. Then responses are converted into certain scores on trait, what kind of person he or she is based on the answers given. And based on those results, one can create something called as a personality profile of that person. What are the different dominant traits that person have? It can be visually presented as a profile. Personality inventories are used in most of the setups, like mental health professional uses them to understand mental illnesses, what kind of problems they have. Researcher use a lot of these assessment techniques. Employers can use to predict certain job performance, whether the person is suitable for the job or not. Schools also use a lot of this personality tests for further understand the type of students and how can make them better in the system and so on, and other institutions. One of the best advantage of these inventories are that they are very easy to administer, very standardized, very fixed pattern. There is no way that it will be same for everyone, certain questions and patterns. Easy to score, computerized scoring can also be done. Standardized comparison across individuals is very easy because it is standardized. I can compare different individuals based on the scores. It's a very efficient way to measure many traits at once. However, certain disadvantage of this inventory is that it is very limited in the only based on the question that are asked. You cannot get further information, you can get only information that are there in the questions, whatever it is. If you want something more, probably this will not work out. Responses may also be biased, so that is another problem. If you are giving these questions to someone, whether the someone is honestly answering or not, so that is a questionable thing. If they are not answering honestly, obviously that will not capture the right kind of personality type that we are, the authentic personality that the person, so that will not be reflected in their answer. So that is also another disadvantage in that. Some of the examples of personality inventory that are used, which are very popular, one is called a 16 personality factor, PF. It was developed by Raymond Cattell, one of the trait theorists. It measures 16 personality factors. It is no longer very popular because there are too many factors involved in it. And this theory is also because much better, more parsimonious and more empirically validated models have also emerged after that, like big 5 factors, which are much more popular. And so therefore, this is not very commonly used nowadays, but this is also one way of looking at the 16 traits on which you can find out on all these 16 traits where a person is, like what are the scores of a person on all these traits. Based on that, we can find out what are the dominant traits and not. Another personality inventory which is very popular is called Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI. This is second version. So it is a very lengthy questionnaire, but still very commonly used because it is very exhaustive. It has 567 true false type items. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to administer it. It primarily assesses psychopathology or certain psychological disorders or tendencies that people have. It's highly valid and reliable. A lot of clinical psychologists use it. Then the neo-personality inventory, that is based on the big 5 factor model, which we will talk about in the next lecture. So this is one of the most accepted trait model, which talks about human personalities can be all categorized under 5 factors only. So these 5 factors are good enough, like extroversion, conscientiousness, neuroticism and so on, openness. So we will talk about that. And one can get a score of a person on all these traits, and based on that we can find out which traits are dominant among these persons. So sometimes self-report mostly it is used. Other report can also be used to find out. People who know another person, they can also rate on these traits and find out. So this is a widely valid and reliable scale. There is another called California Psychological Inventory, CPI. This also measures social behavior and interpersonal skills. So it talks about more specific general behavior in the social context. Assesses normal everyday behavior. If you see MMPI that used pathological behavior, this measures normal behavior in an everyday context, especially in the social or interactive situations, social and work settings, useful for roles in leadership, teamwork. So a lot of employees also use it to find out the behavior in the specific context of interactional processes and so on. Then this was about inventories, which are very most popular. Another category of psychological tests that are used to measure personality are called projective tests. These are not very commonly used because of the complexity involved in it and questionable validity of them. So projective tests present an ambiguous stimuli. So these are based on psychoanalytical theory with the idea that people have many unconscious desires and unconscious motivations. How do you measure that? Because the person will not talk about it. Person may not even realize they have this kind of inner conflicts, desires, motivations. So through this projective test, certain ambiguous stimuli or pictures will be given and they will be asked to explain it. While understanding and explaining those ambiguous stimuli, the person will project all his unconscious desire in terms of explanation. So that is the in principle idea, and based on that the psychologist can interpret what are there in their unconscious motivations. So some tests use ink blots, certain ink blots which are like very ambiguous, doesn't make any sense, and some tests use drawing of people which is very ambiguous, you can explain it in so many ways. So, person is asked what does this look like, what is happening in this picture, this kind of questions, and the picture is not very, you can make multiple interpretation of such pictures. Core idea, people project their personality into ambiguous stimuli. They project in terms of explaining what is the meaning of this and so on. So, stimuli are intentionally unclear and open ended. It is made intentionally in such a way that you can have multiple perspectives to it, and what kind of perspective you put it, that reflects your personality. So, individual impose structure using this imagination, their imagination. So, personality is revealed through interpretation, stories, emotional tone of the stories and so on. One such test which is very commonly used is called Rorschach ink blot test, which was developed by this person, Hermann Rorschach. Therefore, it is named as Rorschach ink blot test. The Rorschach ink blot test, the name is ink blot because they use ink blot and it was first created by this person in 1921 by this Swiss psychiatrist Hermann Rorschach, who had a lifelong fascination with the ink blots dating back to his childhood. As a teenager, he used to acquire nickname Klacks, meaning blot of the ink, due to his intense interest in the ink blots. So, during his psychiatric residency, he observed consistently the differences in the response to ink blots between patients and school children, which inspired him to develop a test. He found that when different ink blots, very ambiguous, does not make any sense, were given to people, he found the different psychiatric patients and school children, they used to give different interpretation of what they see in that picture, and that led him to motivate him to develop this test. So, Rorschach created this ink blots himself by dropping an ink on the paper and then folding it. Eventually, it will be very vague whatever picture that comes out, and he just made it as a stimuli, and he used some 10 distinct patterns of ink blot. Despite initially at that time, it was not at all popular, people did not accept it, and so many negative reviews were there because people could not understand what is the meaning of this. The Rorschach ink blot test gained immense popularity later on after he died. He died after months of publication of this test, succumbing to depression, but obviously it became popular after his death. So, these are like some of the examples of ink blots. You put an ink in a paper and then you just fold it, some different types of picture will come out, and the participant will be asked to explain what do you see in these pictures and so on, and based on that they give certain kind of scoring and so on. So, Rorschach ink blot test involves presenting this kind of cards to individuals one at a time, and some black and white, some other in colors. So, test taker asked to describe what they see in each of this card. After the initial description, the cards were shown again, and the psychologist asked specific questions about their earlier responses, whatever they gave. This examination also observed the test takers' behavior, including their gestures, reaction to specific ink blots, and overall attitude during the testing sessions and so on. Obviously, a lot of people criticize such tests because they question the reliability and validity of these tests. Does it truly measure personality? Is it even consistent? People may give very different version of the story when you show them again after some time. Same person may respond differently on different days. Questions about interpretations also concerned. How do you interpret the responses? So validity and reliability has always been questionable for this kind of projective tests. Some people try to develop very standardized scoring system based on what people say, but still that was not enough in terms of a wider acceptance. John Exner kind of developed a more standardized scoring system, norms of comparison and so on. So, some research support this validity, and still some people use it, but it is not very commonly used, this kind of system. A lot of other people still remain skeptical about this. Another projective test that is used called thematic apperception test, TAT test, which was developed by Henry Murray. That is also a stimuli that is given, the cards are little different in the content. TAT was developed by Henry Murray and Christiana Morgan in 1935. It comprises about 19 ambiguous pictures. Here it is not ink blots, but the pictures, each depicting one or more person along with a blank card, or with one blank card. These pictures are deliberately vague, and even portraits can be interpreted in various ways. Person tells a story about each image, assumes story reflect their inner motives, conflicts and motivation. The idea is from those stories they will try to understand what kind of person he or she is. This kind of pictures were given, shown to the people, and they are asked to describe or tell a story around it. Again, the criticism was very similar to Rocha's, because only about 3% of clinicians use formal scoring system. Mostly people use their own intuitive interpretation. So it is difficult to distinguish how a person actually thinks about it, or whether they are just making up stories. So whether it is a real reflection of their personality or not, how they wish to think, or whether they actually think it like this. A lot of people, some people have also defend such projective tests, support that predictive power depends on, if somebody is very expert, they can find out the real personality. So depends on the expertise. Specific behavior being predicted, can be predicted from this test, may reveal deeper unconscious processes, but not, which are not captured by inventories. So there may be an additional help in terms of deeper unconscious motives can be understood from this test, but still, there is still wider acceptance, is still a lot of people question their validity. Personality psychologists also use something called as an observation and interviews also, sometimes to measure personality in addition to some of these tests like inventories and projective tests. Just so personality inventories are most popular, but in addition to that, people also use sometimes observation of the behavior, just observe how people are doing and whatever they are doing, and sometimes they use structured interviews to ask some questions and then find out about the person. So clinical interviews is another way where more proper interviews are taken with the person along with the psychological test. Interviews may provide information about past and present life experiences, which you cannot get in the inventories, because inventories have very specific questions. To get a detailed understanding of the person, his background and so on, we need to have a proper interview format of things where you can ask about past, present life of the experiences, social family relationships, problems leading to seeking help. All these details we can have it in only in the interview format. All this can help explore behavior, emotions, thoughts, appearance. Through interviews we can understand from the appearance of the person, facial expressions, body language, gestures. All this also tells about the personality. Areas of concern, self-awareness, reality perception, all these things can be understood from the clinical interviews, which just based on inventories you cannot find. So these are additional information we can get from a lot of these tests. All these tests gives additional information. So result from all these tests, guys, some certain inventories that you used, those results can also guide what further needs to be understood, and we can use interviews to get all this additional information. Obviously the limitation is interpretation is subjective and influenced by the interviewer's perspective and traits. So because whoever is taking the interviews, obviously that interview will be more guided by his or her own perspective, so that is a limitation. So clinical interviews are widely used and most effective when combined with objective tests. So generally these are all, in many situations different tests are combined together to get a personality profile of the persons. But inventories, standardized paper and pens tests are most popular because they are more feasible to take and more standardized and ways of finding out about a person. Behavioral observation is just is also sometimes used. You just observe individual's action in a specific context. Accuracy involves when the observer is more familiar with the person and interacts frequently. So the more you observe about a person, more you get to know about that person, their behavior in a certain context. So in clinical interviews, clinician can also observe certain behavior, facial expression, nervous gestures, overall appearance. Interviews can also use observation in addition to interviews. How people is responding, what kind of facial expressions, what is the body language. This also tells about the person. So these observations are usually less structured than formal behavioral methods. This can be less structured also. You just observe what person is behaving in certain contexts. Despite being informal, they provide valuable insight and diagnosis and personality understanding of the person. So these are some of the ways by which personality can be assessed. In many contexts, psychologists can combine some of these methods together to find about the persons. So this is about little bit about the background information of the personality and what is the meaning of personality theories and how it is assessed. In coming lectures, we will talk about some specific theories. With this, I stop here. Thank you.